Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Covenant Cast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm Jonathan.
And today we're going to be going over some industry news, a bit of Destiny, a bit of L5R, and talking a little about Gen Con, which is next week, and of course, going over our weeks and answering questions from you, so stay tuned. What a wildcat week. Last week, Fantasy Flight announced Across the Galaxy right before we were recording the podcast. So Steve and I hit that up last week, where you can get our initial reactions and whatnot there. But before we dive into news and what else is going on, I'm curious. I feel like I haven't actually seen you, Jonathan, in a minute. You also haven't been on the show in a few weeks.
I guess not.
Or maybe a month.
Yeah, I've been working.
So like, quickly-ish.
Are we reversing Are we flipping this and reversing?
Yeah, I'm flipping and reversing here.
I'm just trying to.
I know how much you love
script here.
I know how you love things changing at the last minute. Little insight here. Jonathan hates that.
I don't
but no, I'm just curious.
I'm a planner. I'm a planner. I'm not actually that good at improvisation. Come to find out. So I like to prepare for things.
Well,
But this is just switching the order. So honestly, I'm fine.
I don't even know if planner is the right word. I think it's more like if you were a boat. You'd be a boat that needs to turn slowly?
Yes, I think that's
fair. You know where you're going, and you're going to get there.
And I have a lot of power behind me.
But like, switching gears and turning to go that way is like bothersome.
It's very difficult, which is really not the place I wanted to be in my life. You would think that I would be more nimble as a creative person, but that's not the case. I got a lot of stuff I'm thinking about constantly, which means that whenever it's time to think about something new on the dime, it's kind of hard to turn the old cargo ship.
What have you been thinking about? Anything exciting or fun, or not even thinking about what's going on?
So I mean, basically, a couple things have happened since you last saw me. The dog has gotten.
So you have a dog named Bogey.
I have a dog named Bogey. I think I talked about it last time. He's got heartworms, which I didn't realize this till I saw it on Reddit last night. But like, people are like, "Oh, I adopted this heartworm positive dog," and I was like, "Oh, you're such a hero! What a beautiful thing." I didn't realize that. This is just a dog that was given to us. I didn't realize that what we were doing was heroic.
And now you're learning why that is.
Yeah, it's actually very difficult. So the big thing is that he's got to be on exercise restriction for like 120 days plus. We're 90 days in,
which is difficult for a puppy.
And it's like he's like laying around, he's depressed all the time, and it's like I can't even play with him because I can't make him excited. Yeah, but at the same time, we found out last time we went to the vet that he has both in his previous life been hit by a car and shot by a shotgun.
You mean earlier in this current life?
Earlier, yeah, before we had him, he did not do. So he had a kind of rough life before getting to us, but because he got hit by a car, he has a lot of trouble using the bathroom. So we're not supposed to walk him. We're not supposed to let him outside more than 2 times a day, but at the same time, we've got him on pills to help grease the old chute, and so we gotta kind of.
That's such a great way of putting it.
We gotta measure if we want him to poop on the carpet or if we want him to die from heartworms. So it's a constant struggle.
That's a challenge.
So that's fun.
But you're like 75% of the way to the.
I think so, yeah. 90. We're about to get up on 90, and that's when he gets the last 2 big shots, hopefully, and then everything. Then we have to keep on extra restriction for 90 to 60 days. Something like that.
60 to 90 days after that point?
After that, yeah, something like that. And then they check him again to make sure it's all cool, and that's fine. So one of the nights, not too long ago, we had given him the stuff that helps him grease the chute.
Yeah.
And
didn't think this is where we're gonna go today.
He was whining quite a bit, and I was like, all right, fine, I'll take you outside. It's nighttime, but fine. I'll do it.
I know where you're going with this.
And so the night before, I had done something very similar.
You have had a crazy little time.
There's this big old spider web. I live out in the country. There's a big old spider web with a big old spider in the middle, and I was like looking at the dog and looking at the ground and making sure he wasn't about to step or I was about to step on anything. And I almost ran smack dab into this giant spider web.
Which is not fun for
anybody.
Which is
not, and I didn't really want that. It would have been fine, but I didn't want it. And so this time I was like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to spotlight the spider web because it does it in the same spot every time. Make sure we dodge it. Make sure we don't run into it. And so I did. I had my light on the spider web, and I was well on my way to dodging it when I felt a terrible pain in my ankle as I was being bit multiple times by a copperhead.
A snake. For those who are unfamiliar.
Poisonous pit viper snake. And so that kind of ruined my night. And I ended up going back inside, Googling what to do when you get bit by a copperhead. Drove myself to the emergency room, had to spend the night in the ICU, blah, 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 blah. That was What was that? That was
Last
week. Yeah.
And hey, I'm really glad you're alive.
I'm glad I'm alive too. The anti-venom was great.
And already back on the podcast.
Yeah,
didn't even take it down. Just ready to go.
But yeah, the people were great. So yeah, I've been doing that kind of stuff, and then just like because of
I've been
that,
dealing with that kind of trauma.
the whole house and the maintenance of having a place in the country in the summer fell behind, and so my wife and I are both playing catch up, and then getting ready for Gen Con and that kind of stuff. So it's been an ordeal, but we're kind of getting back on top of it, and so that sort of sense of victory is in the air, hopefully.
Wow.
It stays that way.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that makes my...
we also painted.
Your inside your
inside
house?
the house.
That's how you know you made it.
Yeah.
That's
well,
when
we
you're
did that before all this stuff happened.
You painted, then you got bit by a snake, and you've had the dog the whole time.
Yeah,
which
the
has
dog's
been
been
fun.
around the whole time. Yeah.
Well, that makes my my weekend seem like a breeze. So, thing about this is it's kind of related to the industry as well, which is it's pretty normal for like June, July to kind of be a quieter part of the year.
Sure.
Because a lot of companies are saving whatever big things you're going to do and expansions and new games and such for Gen Con, which is where we're going next week. We'll be doing a lot of coverage, so you can stay tuned for that. But the June, July phase is usually a pretty good time to get things done personally.
Yes.
Because of that, because there's less travel. Like we traveled, I know I traveled in January, February, March, April, May.
Adepticon,
and
Worlds. June. There's a bunch of
went
stuff.
To Gamma,
yeah.
Went to Worlds, had a couple other trips in there for business, then had a personal trip to Chicago. So June, July though, I traveled once at the beginning of June, but then past that, it's been relatively quiet for me, which has been really nice to get certain things done. But I'm getting married in not that long, so there's been a lot of that planning going on.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Like
First time hearing it.
On the cast live, I'm announcing it now. But not only is that happening, but this past weekend is when the move happened because we're moving into place.
That's right, yeah.
So that was going on, but we also had scheduled a Covenant Masters qualifier for the same weekend.
Yes, that's
and it's this weird kind of thing where like leases are up, so you have to move by a certain point. It's also the middle of summer. Friday was like 110.
Yeah.
And we moved Saturday technically when the Masters was happening. I was here playing and there were movers moving. But
players playing and movers moving.
Then the chaos of after that ensued, right? Which is like unpacking and organizing and stuff, and it's just crazy. So it's been really busy.
Yeah.
But not in the same way that it was busy earlier in the year. It's just busy in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great. The Covenant Masters was great. One thing about the Covenant Masters, you may be wondering. So the first Covenant Masters was like a month ago, qualifier, and did really well. I got top 6. I got second actually. Had a great time. And then this one was with a new set, Way of the Force.
Yeah.
And I got hammered.
Oh, really?
Side note,
Really?
Not with alcohol necessarily. That may have happened a little, but not.
Well, that happened after
I wouldn't say
one.
hammered exactly. But yeah, I drafted the new set a handful of times and just really had no idea. Like I was just at a loss. I was losing a lot of games. So going into the event, I wasn't exactly expecting a bunch of.
You weren't really feeling like maybe this is your time to shine.
Yeah, and then I proceeded to just get laced bad.
Wow. Okay.
But congrats to Eric Wainwright. He's a local who wins a lot of events around here.
Yeah.
And he won.
He's the guy that wins.
Yeah, he wins a lot.
So basically, if someone wants to, sorry to interrupt, if someone wants to come in and wreck you, they should show up for the draft of the next release.
They should challenge me to a draft of this set in particular.
Okay.
Typically, I mean,
get your head around
so
this
we play card games for a long time.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And I've drafted a lot, so it's not like rocket science.
Sure.
Like you kind of start figuring things out, and I've drafted Destiny a whole lot. But for whatever reason, and I don't know, there's definitely certain parts of it that are like, you just had a bad draft. Sometimes you don't, like if you don't see characters particularly, it can just go very south very quickly.
Yeah.
And like there were 2 of my 3 drafts that day that I didn't see any characters, which is bad. But at the same time, it's like play mistakes and like deck building mistakes and picking the wrong cards kind of stuff like coming to light. So it was just rough, but my favorite part, because we talk the talk a lot, which is like, we need to make events that are more accessible, that are more fun, more geared towards participation. And truth be told, last round I was 4-4, which is like, not great.
It's 50-50.
50-50, but that's not necessarily where I'm used to being.
Sure.
And then I proceeded to lose that game. And it was a nail biter. So I went 4-5, under 500,
okay.
Which is, I got some work to do. But anyways, I went 4-5, and even in that last round where it's like, neither of us are going to make the cut, It doesn't matter who wins. We played an incredible game of
Nice,
Destiny.
yeah, you said it was a nail biter.
And it was super fun.
Great.
And so and I had a chance to meet a handful of people that I had never met from out of town. It was really cool representation. We had a car crew come down from Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
We had Texas is usually represented at these events, in Kansas and Missouri and Arkansas and Oklahoma. But had a great chance to. It's cool. The thing about draft, I'm telling you, man, it's so social. That I remember I played one round against a guy. It finished pretty quickly, and then we just went and got a coffee together.
Nice.
And it's like, never met this person at Forest. It's just like we're just hanging out and chatting about Destiny and how fun it is. So it was cool to experience that part of the tournament where it's like you're playing and drafting with people who aren't expecting to make the cut anymore.
Yeah.
And it was actually very refreshing and really fun.
It's a nice place to be, isn't it?
Not that the cool part of it is even last time when I was at the higher tables throughout the Swiss, even in the cut, it's like everyone there's very friendly, everyone's good, but also like no one's taking it too seriously.
Yeah.
And so I hung out for a while after and watched the top 6 players drafting and stuff, and they were all having a good time, right? And like again, that's one of my favorite parts of that game, and also just that format is just how like low key it is.
Yeah.
So if you're interested in coming to a future qualifier, the next one is on August 18th.
Check them out.
We've also, that same weekend is when we're actually hosting our store championship. So we're doing this thing where Saturday on the 18th is the Covenant Masters qualifier. Sunday actually is our store championship on the 19th.
Oh, neat.
So if you're from out of town, technically you could leave super early Saturday morning and get here. If you're in the 4 or 5 hour range, you could do that. You could come up Friday night as well.
And we usually have like kind of a get together Friday night.
Friday night's usually people hanging out in the store, drafting, maybe having a couple beers, just super relaxed, playing some Destiny. But then Sunday is going to be Constructed Store Championship, and it's going to start at 11 on the dot. So that should be over by like 3, 4 in the afternoon kind of a thing, because Constructed Destiny is fast.
Yeah.
And so the basic idea is that you could technically leave early Saturday, play, stay one night in Tulsa, and also get a store championship.
That's really cool.
So
That's really cool.
if you're from out of town and considering coming to an event, I think this is going to be a really good one to be at because you'll get kind of the double dip of the 2 events, and we'd love to have you.
And if people are listening and don't know, what do they get for coming to the Covenant Masters?
So a couple things. When you sign up, you obviously get 3 drafts. So the event is 3 drafts for Destiny, so that's it. The packs and the cards you get from drafting and whatnot. And that I will say, this was actually nice. So this time I only bought 1 saga set for Way of the Force because I knew I'd be drafting a lot.
Sure.
And there's actually commons and uncommons and rares that I want more of, and then there's legendaries I still don't have 2 of. So during the draft, I actually, while I didn't win a whole lot, I didn't get a lot of characters, but like I got a nice pool of legendaries,
needed,
and so like I felt pretty, even the last draft, it's like I'm 3-3 drafting. It's like I'm not gonna make the cut probably, but you open a pack and it's like, oh, there's another copy of that card that I really want, which is cool.
So you get that.
So you get the packs. Everyone that shows up gets the super nice custom white deck box that I'm a big fan of. And then everyone also gets participation like damage tokens. So there are these tokens that we made specifically for the event. And that's what you get for showing up. The top 36 get participation shield tokens, which are, thematically they kind of look, they're stylized the same. You're aware of that, as the person who's the designer. And then the top 18 get the resource tokens. So technically speaking, like top 18 basically get a token set.
Cool.
Which is cool.
That's cool.
And we've had 20s and 30s for the events. So like most people at least get 2 damage and shield tokens kind of a thing. You also get sleeves. The deck box is big enough to hold everything you draft during the day. So it's basically everything you need except for rivals is provided. And then further prizes, top 6 get amazingly awesome. I'm a huge fan. I'm
glad you like it.
Bummed out. Like so the top 6 get 1 character board.
Right.
Which is this cool like acrylic engraved design, matches the tokens board that holds your character card, the dice, and then damage and shield tokens. And then the winner gets a wooden version of that. But I got top 6 the first time, so I have 1 of those blue boards.
Yeah, I saw it on the picture for the Instagram picture when you and Steven were playing.
Yeah, and the number of people who ask, where do you get that board, is high.
Yeah.
So if you're watching, one way you get it is by getting top 6 at the Covenant Masters, but we're also obviously considering the idea of actually making similar boards for sale, so you can stay tuned for that. But the top 6 also get to draft a 4th time. The top 6 also get to qualify for the championship which is on February 1st and 2nd, that weekend.
Okay.
And we've already announced that Jeremy Zorin, the lead developer, is going to be there in attendance,
fantastic.
along with a lot of other things that we have yet to announce. So that's basically the Covenant Masters.
We got a whole big setup.
We're hosting qualifiers. We have some cool announcements, I think, that are going to come up in the next couple of weeks. But if you were considering coming to a Covenant Masters or a Store Championship and you're from out of town, I think this is the one.
Yeah.
Like, this is easily the one to come to besides the actual championship, but you're going to have to qualify for that.
Cool. And just in case anyone was wondering if I was just setting Zach up for that, I really didn't know. My head's been down. I've been working on a new website for Covenant. I guess I can say that, right?
Yeah, I think Steven talked about that last week.
And it's almost done, but I haven't been paying attention to anything else. Like the tokens and stuff, I need
Yeah, you
to
design them, but then once they're designed, it's gone.
I was like, he's going to be here. That's great.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
That's
I didn't
awesome.
even know the date for the
I was saying,
invitation.
before we started recording, I was talking to John, I was like, at this point, I used to be in this office as well. And then Bryce came along and I gave him my space. But I was talking to John, I was like, I feel like we talk more when we're on the cast together than when we're not, which is sad. But we'll figure that out. So in other Destiny news, get here on August 18th. We'd love to have you. I'll be there.
It seems just like a really good time, to be honest with you.
Across the Galaxy, super pumped. If you're unaware, we've already sold out of our on-release Saga sets.
Oh, dang.
So they're you're like, yeah, he really does have no idea. Where's the headphones, designs, and stuff. But
Things are going well.
They're now, the Saga sets that are available for you right now are the within 1 week Saga sets. And then once those are sold out, it'll be within 2 weeks. Because there's only so much supply that we have and only so many we can make in a certain amount of time. So if you want one, if you want to guarantee you get all the cards, and if you're unfamiliar with what a Saga set is technically, it's one of every legendary and 2 of every other card in a set, if you want to skip the whole booster pack thing. On that note, we also talked about this a little bit last week. Box subscriptions, we only have so many of those spaces. The 86, I think 12 a box now with free shipping as long as you get 2 boxes.
So that's as low as we can go.
Legally speaking.
as low as we can go.
As low as we can. Minimum advertised price. But that's obviously a new set just came out, like less than a month ago at this point. So if you're not wanting to spend a whole bunch of money right now on a new set, the box subscription is a nice way to guarantee you're getting stuff without having to spend money way in advance.
Oh, cool.
So you can check that out. And then another update on kind of a tangential similar note is L5R. The Dynasty rings.
Yes, they're getting out into the world. I'm so happy
I
about
remember, like, probably 6 months ago, you were on the podcast and you were like, the product I'm most excited about is the one on my desk.
Yeah.
And that was it, right?
That was it. Oh, yeah, that's definitely it.
The L5R ring. So if you pre-order the Dynasty rings, those are shipping by the time this is up. Over half of those that were ordered have been shipped out the door.
Excellent.
So they should be on the way. If you're going to Gen Con, hopefully you're going to have those in time. And then the rest of them will be shipping as quickly as we can make and send them. And those should be available. If you pre-order them now, they should ship very quickly. We're talking like within the next 2 to 4 weeks kind of a thing.
Okay.
Versus they're listed as like a big pre-order window. But the reality is that they're now starting to come through and we're starting to get sets and stuff.
That's
and
so great.
I saw them this morning getting checked through for quality assurance and stuff. And it was like,
that's
they
awesome.
look
And
great.
big, if anyone out there has ordered them, big thank you. I just think I'm very happy with them.
Thank you. It was a crazy product, a very extensive design process and a crazy techniques to make something like that. And I know, when we announced them with the announcement video, it was basically like, if you're willing to order these, we'll make them. But like, we're not even sure people are going to be willing to order them. And then to have such a great response from the community was incredible. So thank you so much for your support and for buying those. It really does allow us to keep doing this and everything else that we do.
Like some really cool next level products.
And we're just getting started. How about that?
Very exciting.
Last thing for me, actually, there's just so much going on, actually, for nothing, for this quiet time. We also will be going to Gen Con next week.
Yes, we will. The big Gen Con. It's crazy, man. Gen Con is absolutely crazy, and the thing for me is that it never gets easier necessarily, but it continues to change.
I felt like last year was significantly easier.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably true, but here's what I mean, is that like when we first started going, right, it was about tournaments. And then we started going more as like Covenant, as let's cover Gen Con. It became like, hey, let's get as many interviews as possible. And then we actually became like people. We've been in the industry long enough where like we started to know people, and now it's like, let's get face-to-face meetings, like an actual convention. Not just like a big game showcase or even a big tournament showcase, but an actual like, hey, let's sit down for drinks or dinner or whatever and talk about stuff. It's just really cool having watched that evolution to see what's going on now.
Yeah, because we definitely have shifted quite a bit in just our approach. So one of the things we will be doing is we're we usually cover it. You can check out our Facebook and our YouTube and our Instagram and our Twitter accounts. But we're also going to be exploring, we're actually even testing right now, the audio setup on right now, the audio that's being recorded. And this part of this podcast is going to get posted to Instagram TV.
That's a thing?
Which is cool.
I didn't know that existed.
Instagram's doing this thing where you basically make video posts, and if you're verified, which for some reason we're not yet, and apparently you have to pay someone
It's pretty weird.
What was the country he was saying?
Bolivia? Bulgaria?
Bulgaria, I don't know. Somewhere to get verified, though, because there's no process for it. But ultimately, we can post up to 10-minute clips once we get verified, up to 60-minute clips. So we are experimenting with posting parts or entireties of videos like this podcast to Instagram TV. But we're testing the audio setup for that for the same way we're looking to potentially stream a lot of our normal content through Facebook that we historically have recorded. So, FFG In-Flight Report is on Wednesday night, and last year we streamed it, and hopefully the audio will be way better this year. But then after that, like last year, we filmed early on, we had a Legion demo and an L5R demo, and normally we sprint to record those in some way. We get there super early, whatever we need to do, and we film them, and then Jonathan immediately goes into a all-out sprint to edit and finish and upload that video.
Yes.
And when there's 100,000 people in downtown Indianapolis, uploading a video is not easy.
No, it's impossible. I mean, these videos end up being, plus 2 gigabytes plus.
Yeah.
And most hotels throttle your internet, your upload after about, 500 megabytes. So first of all, if anyone has a solution for that, I would love to know it.
Let us know.
And second of all, that makes things very difficult. Even like a lot of mobile carriers now too will throttle you after a certain amount.
Well, and that's what we've done the song and dance a lot, where it's like through my mobile hotspot, we'll be uploading videos, or we'll use the press room has an internet connection that we can use. Yeah. But anyways, so you sprint, we upload it, we get that video up as fast as possible. And so one thing we're going to be testing is the ability to just live stream it.
Yeah.
Which is like we're getting, if there's some new game that gets announced, or we're getting demos of various games at Gen Con, it may well be that we're live streaming that on Facebook, and even experimenting with things like taking questions from the audience if we're getting a demo from like someone on staff or a designer. So stay tuned to that. Be sure to check out our Facebook when we're at Gen Con. And we're just going to be trying out a whole lot of stuff and covering Gen Con, specifically focused on expandable, community-driven kind of games, right? So that's
really cool. I'm glad I came on the podcast today because I
get to learn all these things. Yeah. Well, you should.
It's awesome.
You should pay attention.
I think that's great. We're going to have like smiley faces and stuff like that kind of a thing where people can.
They can, yeah. So I've been experimenting with, and everything's constantly an experiment, right? Yeah. Things change every day, so you just have to keep learning and keep pushing the boundaries on what you can do. But on Wednesday nights, which I've been streaming. Destiny.
That's right.
So I play Destiny and X-Wing when I'm into X-Wing. Second edition's coming, so I'm kind of on pause, right?
Sure.
First edition's not as appealing.
May as well just relax a little bit until the big rush.
And so, anyways, I've been streaming to our Team Covenant Facebook Destiny, doing drafts, doing constructed, kind of figuring out the software and how to interact with the audience and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of that is leading to the next experiment, which is at Gen Con, which is how can we do this better and provide more access and make it easier for people to get to whatever it is they're looking for.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, like, overnight edits of videos just are obnoxious.
It's hard.
And hard to do. And then, like,
not easy.
They get up and, like, the Legion demo, I think, is a great example of, like, we made our system so efficient that we're capable of doing this, but also, like, it would have been way better if we could have just shown it live, right? And that obviously in post we can edit more and add that kind of a thing. But like ultimately, when a new game drops, you just want to see it.
Yeah, and also I'm just thinking about this live now. But even if we're taking like questions from the audience during a demo, that can cue me in whenever I'm editing it to like maybe emphasize X or Y, so that all the questions are answered in our final YouTube video.
Yeah, and that's what's cool too is like we can go live and it can be a little more behind the scenes, a little more raw, give you early access to it. But then when we do produce it, that's great, right? Like if there are questions, like, well, can we film something to answer this, which may be the answer to the question live, that we then edit into the section where it would make more sense.
Or it can be even like, just a graphical solution, just highlight something a little bit more.
You all right over there?
Yeah, I got something in mind.
Yeah. So last thing for me before we get on to the questions is we have a new channel trailer
We do.
For YouTube.
We do. We finally put the old one to bed.
Yeah, the inside joke on this one, not really a joke, just the knowledge that you need to understand why this is actually so important for us is anytime that you go to our YouTube channel, the trailer starts playing.
Yeah, and I know those first 3 notes by heart.
Yeah, and so like we do a lot of video, and like anytime anyone, this is the marketing office particularly, is like pulling up.
Yeah.
I need to get to this video, or I want to check something on YouTube or whatever. Wow!
Yeah, and
this
so
is like the sound of that
it's also
trailer.
worth noting that Steven's computer is right back there, and his computer has access to the big speakers that we have in the room that usually just play music. And so whenever he, particularly as the marketing guy, is checking,
every time he goes to check a video.
Yeah.
So for a good 2 years, probably a year and a half, we've been like wanting to replace it.
Yeah.
But it's also the kind of thing where like you don't want to spend time replacing that too often because you'd rather just keep producing things that are truly valuable, right? And so it's just kind of been a long time coming, and Ben did a great job with it.
He did.
And
did a fantastic job.
Just super cool. So if you happen to want to check out our trailer, you can. I think it's cool.
Is it up at this point?
Yeah, it's live. And if you have thoughts on it, leave a comment in the video. I'd love to get your feedback. But it's up. We no longer ever again have to hear that music, and I'm pretty happy about that.
And I noticed that the music on this one is incredibly toned down. It's very quiet. So
yeah, well,
I think Ben was tired of hearing it as well.
Oh, there's thoughts on the trailer. We'll skip that. Okay, so we're going to jump to questions from the audience.
Okay.
You can use the hashtag AskCovenant on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We'll answer your questions right here on the show. We love doing it. And
also, skywriting. If you skywrite hashtag Team Covenant.
If you skywrite above our office, hashtag Team Covenant, you'll get way more than your question answered
We'll
on the show.
mention it on the podcast.
No, but really, we really do appreciate you asking the questions. It is still blows my mind that there are enough people listening and watching the show and asking questions that we can continue week in, week out.
Yeah.
To have 4 or 5 questions that we can answer that are actually like something we can discuss.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Please keep asking the questions. We're happy to answer them, and we'll keep doing it as long as you keep asking. So question 1 from James Parsons. I wouldn't be surprised if Team Covenant as a whole has over a century of combined competitive and casual card game experience, from Dragon Ball to the spoilers to the most recent FFG, LCG offerings. I completely understand that an experienced card game player does not automatically a game designer make, but has the thought ever crossed the minds of anyone up there, even in passing, to dive into the industry in a new way and create your own card game?
Yes.
So
I think let me start off saying 2 things. I don't know. I've been working here for a very long time, and I worked here even before I officially worked here.
Me too.
There has never been an idea that we've come up with that has ever just gone away entirely. Like it's always kind of in the tumbler. And to that being said, if you look at our official documents, the name of our company is Covenant TCG.
Yep.
Which at one point, Zach and Steven tried to convince everybody it meant a true community of gamers. We all know it meant trading card game. And so, like that, originally it was started right with there was sort of an intent that was going to be one of our early pivots.
So that's not true.
Oh, darn it.
Correct. That's close. So the truth is that, like when I started Covenant when I was in college, ultimately.
Sure, yeah.
And by starting Covenant, it's a very early version of Covenant.
You got an eBay store, right?
Yeah, eBay Pro Store, right? I started selling stuff. Yeah, start somewhere. But
yeah.
So at the time, right, it was like the names of corporations were typically name followed by an acronym for whatever acronym or defining trait. So like Apple was Apple Computers. And you go down the list where it's like very few were actually incorporated as like
just Apple
Inc. Right. They didn't change that till like late 2000s or 2010s.
Okay.
So because we started, like I literally started the site as CovenantTCG.com to sell singles for a collectible card game. And then we soon after started the Team Covenant blog, which is where the name Team Covenant came back around.
Yep.
Covenant, the word came from the childhood story. But then it was like, okay, and at the time, like you couldn't have a blog that was also a store. Like that technology didn't exist. So blogging was very new. So I needed a new domain for the blog. So I bought teamcovenant.com.
Okay.
And Team Covenant obviously got significantly more popular than just a site that sells singles.
Fair enough.
So once they merged, it became teamcovenant.com, which is fine. It's great. But the thing about that is I actually started working on my first card game when I was like 16. the Star Wars TCG from Wizards got canceled.
Right.
And then so me and another guy that I knew started working on this like space-based game.
Okay,
right?
cool.
And that didn't ever get anywhere. It was, I mean, it was
most 16-year-old project.
It was classic. It was classic. But
we learned some lessons.
yeah, and then started Covenant, and then not the first summer we were doing Covenant, but the second summer, we actually started toying around with designing an actual game officially. And at the time, we were joking around that we were going to call it Covenant TCG because that was our name.
Yeah.
And it was some interesting things about it were it was alt history.
Yep.
I see your walrus.
I
walrus
drew a little
drawing here.
walrus like infantryman, like a walrus man infantryman.
You know,
That's all I remember
we
about it.
imagined like
It's cool
a
idea.
George Washington. The first thing I thought was, and I was super into history when I was in college, like American history in
didn't know
particular.
that.
Yeah.
We should talk about that sometime.
And so, but the picture in my head was Washington sailing across the river, except for like this half of his face was robotic.
Okay.
Like it had been blown off and fixed,
Yeah.
right? And there was some event in deep history that advanced technology way faster.
Okay.
So it was like 1777, except for technology from way in the future, kind of a thing. And then that led to all sorts of crazy.
and
but
then we got like half
because
animal.
we all
people.
liked historical figures.
Sure.
But then wanted to tell some kind of interesting story
Yeah.
based on that.
I think
So
that's a cool setting.
yeah. Anyways, but then at some point, like the reality is that, and I think most companies go through this as they're going, but it's like you need to figure out why you exist as a company and how you're going to go about achieving that, and then what you're going to do that.
Sure.
And so the trick of that is like making games is very hard. And there's a lot involved in it, right? Not only just the design of a game, but you've got art, you've got templates, you've got production, you've got distribution, you've got printing, you've got manufacturing, you've got a lot of the times that happens in China, you've got logistics, you've got all these things. And the truth is that like, as a company, the problem we are trying to solve is not making
There's not
games,
enough
right?
games in the market.
There's a ton of games, and there's a lot of really incredible games, way more than we could ever even think about covering. Even one of the stats from Gamma is that there's 3,000 or 4,000 board games that come out a year. And it's like, there's no shortage of good games. The problem we are focused on is it's really hard to get involved in tabletop gaming.
Yeah.
Not if you're already in. Once you kind of know the ropes, it's not so bad. But for most people, like the idea of getting into Star Wars Destiny is like impossible.
Yeah.
And so our entire company is built to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And so it is possible. I mean, who knows? Like we could end up making I think we could make a great card game.
Yeah.
We have a ton of experience.
Well, we have a lot of experience playing card games, but also, as you were saying, there's a lot of people out there that have a lot of experience making games already, right? And if I know one thing in my old age, which is the more you do something, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
And so, why don't we continue to do the things that we're good at, they continue to do the things that they're good at. Not to say that we don't have good ideas. And very specifically, it's worth noting that it's something that I really enjoy doing as I'm like going to sleep at night. So I'm not thinking about work, but I'm thinking about kind of stuff that
Sort
makes
of
me
work,
excited.
yeah.
It's always like game design. And nothing ever happens about it, but it's someplace to put my mind so like it doesn't keep me awake, but also I can kind of fall asleep in a happy way. That being said, I think for the sake of this conversation, that I would like to posit the following subject. There are now enough and potentially too many new games being made. And that whenever that kind of happens, whenever that thing happens, whenever I see a lot of people flocking to one particular segment of any industry, the one that I always remind myself of is that when the housing market, everyone was like, I'm going to flip houses. It's like, immediately that something's about to go bad.
Yeah, it's like people on the Bitcoin trend.
Yeah, and you need to find something else. So tangential to making new games, I think what there could be a lot of innovation in is supporting games. I think tournament formats.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Like, I think distribution models. I mean, really, the whole LCG thing was just the same principles of game design that have been around forever, but they had a new distribution model, right? That's what made it cool. So maybe there are new distribution models. I know that there are new formats and exciting formats and like ways to engage a community that haven't been tried and haven't happened. And taking designers and instead of putting them on, let's make a new game every year, like instead of being like, let's make a game and then like really make it good enough to where people dig it, right? But then like put all of our effort into supporting it. Put all of our effort into new and exciting formats and just ways that we can maybe even tweak one thing or another and like give people a whole new experience every time they come to the table or every new tournament they go to. I think that would be really, really cool. So that's where I would if I were to really have this discussion with Zach in like an official capacity.
Not on the podcast?
Yeah, not on the podcast. That's probably where I would start start putting my energy towards.
The thing for me on that is just the reality of, for me, the main point of tabletop games, right, is their ability to bring people together,
right,
and for people to relax and have a good time and have a common thing they're doing that allows for those kind of one-on-one, really profound human connections, right? And to me, it's like, I don't think tabletop games struggle to do that.
Sure.
So in terms of innovating tabletop games themselves, that's the curious thing, because even the LCD format, right, it may well make it more accessible for the average person to buy, which is that's a good innovation, right? But in terms of like innovating like game mechanics and stuff like that, that's way less interesting to me, because like that's not even what I see as a problem. Games are great. The games I'm playing right now, like X-Wing and Destiny, I love those games, right? And it may well be someone out there right now is working on a better, crazier, cooler thing that is going to be more exciting, and I'm excited about it, right? Happy to do that. But that's just not even the problem we're looking at. The problem I want to solve is the other half of that equation, right? And then that's the truth of that, is like we're kind of, compared to the 90s when I first started playing games, blessed with riches of how much is being made. And a lot of that is to do with how much the industry has grown, because there's actual, like, a lot of companies can be supported with this industry.
That's the way we say it,
But the funny part is, if we can get a whole lot more people into the industry, a lot more people playing games because you make that more accessible, then it's going to keep spiraling, right? Which is like, if there's 10 times as many people playing tabletop games, what then could be done in tabletop gaming in terms of, whether it's the actual making of the game or the support of the game, where if your game has a lot more players, you can do things that you can't do with a smaller player base. So, long answer to a seemingly yes or no question. Thanks, James, for the question.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. There's actually a lot there, and like I said,
we could go on. That could be a whole hour of talking easily.
I dig thinking about, and I've got some ideas, some really radical stuff.
Like, if you want to call me. I'm just kidding.
Anyhow, the next one by Rudolph Valentino says, "I'm looking to get into Arkham Horror and was trying to find your learning series. Does it exist? Should I keep searching? Your enthusiasm has gotten me ready to dive in, but I'm looking for something to help me out."
It's funny you should ask, Rudolph.
It's funny you should ask.
Because, my general answer is you should always keep searching. Very Eastern of me, just kidding. Actually, very recently, we recorded our Arkham, that's the second time we've recorded our Arkham series.
Yes.
The learning series itself is a format that we are continuing to experiment with, and it's refining and evolving all the time. And so we had filmed several months back an Arkham learning series and decided to reshoot it because we thought we could do better. And so I literally, on Ben's screen over there editing right now, is a learning Arkham video. So that will be up very soon. And it will be everything you need to know how to play, and how to buy the game, and all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned. We'll be doing that, and I'm sure you'll see plenty more learning series to come.
Yep, and I'm glad we got you into Arkham. It's one of the games I always recommend to everyone.
If it is maybe one of the best games ever.
Yeah.
I haven't played enough to really say that.
Right.
But from what I have played, and especially just for what it is, like a cooperative card game, I think it's going to be a challenge for someone. That's the point. Going back to our first question, right? It's like, Arkham's amazing. The only thing Arkham needs is more people playing. And there's a lot of people playing. But like, there's a ton of people watching like Stranger Things. And to me, Arkham is basically Stranger Things.
Yep.
But like,
a little pulpy, but it's like you replace the 80s vibe for like the pulp
and
50s vibe.
You know what I'd love to see is a Stranger Things deluxe expansion for Arkham.
I think there was a fan-made one.
There was.
Okay.
But I mean, I would love to see like
an official.
If there was an official Stranger Things core set in that system.
Goodness gracious.
Like, then it'd be awesome.
That would be pretty rad.
Bring it on.
Wow, okay, all right.
Next up, we have Miles Simmons. He says, is there a possibility of the Covenant Cast doing an actual play of D&D on a podcast? Or perhaps one of the FFG role-playing systems? Not sure if it aligns with your business interests, but I'd be so stoked to listen to you guys start up a campaign, though I can't decide if I would be more excited if it was set in the fantasy or Star Wars setting. # make my dreams come true.
So, Miles, somewhere in the archives of Steven's old computer and one of my old computers, there are probably like 8 different audio recordings of a Burning Wheel Gold session
Really?
that Steven and Robert and I all did whenever we were living together. And Tim was in there too, for a while.
For a while.
Yeah, I think he was like in college, so he had other stuff to do.
Yeah.
But I have long thought that if you did it right, a D&D playthrough podcast could be absolutely amazing. Because basically, here are the elements that you have. You've got a narrator that is telling people what they see, and you've got characters
like you need like a soundtrack and sound
that
effects
have their own voices, right? So if you were to take that and maybe even strip the dice rolls out, or do something where it's like, all right, now roll whatever. And just keep the story elements, and then add in a ton of sound design. Oh, I think it would be so great. And that was the original intention, but like most of these things, it would have taken a massive amount of time, and it just wasn't. It wasn't.
And we were really good about taking on projects early on that took far too long and did far too little for us, right?
That one, yeah.
And so, just the idea of focus, you eventually learn what really matters and what doesn't. But I will say, this may blow your mind. I should have shared this article with you, which is I saw Hasbro did their earnings report for Q2 of this year.
Okay.
And the CEO of Hasbro reported that D&D is having its most significant year ever.
It's going crazy. Everywhere I turn, there's like new D&D videos. There's celebrities doing stuff. There's podcasts.
And mentioned... And there's been a lot of D&D content happening, but Anne mentioned that they see the future of D&D as basically he pitched some vision of like an esports D&D, where like it was normal for people to like live cast their D&D sessions, and even talking about the kind of stuff you're doing but live, where it's like there's sound.
Maybe like have a soundboard or something.
Yeah, exactly, and some guy on the sound, and so... We may well see that. Now, to actually answer your question, is it possible that we'll see that on the Covenant Cast? I would say unlikely.
Unlikely.
That we would just jam out a session on the Covenant Cast. It's possible. What's way more possible is that we live stream a session. But especially if there was like a really cool new expansion or something going on, and we're at Gen Con and we're with a designer.
Yeah.
So that is something you might very well get to see at some point. But even then, it's like...
I would think, probably the best chance that you'll have for something like that is if one of us is a guest on someone else's podcast. All right, I think that's probably, like, given our business model, given what we're focusing on.
So if you're watching and you have a D&D live stream or cast, hit John up.
But could you imagine? So back in the day,
I could imagine.
Like even on their Program Companion, they have like just someone with sound effects who's just like making them in the corner with like a box of different things. Like if you were to bring that back, plus,
that's pretty cool, right?
Buddy.
Yeah, it could be. I mean,
that could be great.
It would be cool. But again, like I said earlier at the top of the show, going to Gen Con, our big focus is on the expandable community building games.
It is.
And so while we all love RPGs,
we do. They
aren't exactly always in line with what we're trying to do yet. But it's hard to say. I mean, things change all the time.
There's a lot that we would have to do to change our current model to fit RPGs in, but not much. I don't know. But there's right now, at least the way I would want to do it, it's way more time than we really have time for.
To do it. Yeah, unfortunately.
But
that's you never know. Stay tuned and
I'm really excited about that thing. Oh, this is mine.
It is.
Hey, this is from Star Wars Talk.
Hey.
Talking Star Wars. Ask Covenant, do you think stores should have a pre-built list for new players who are interested in a game if there is an event? Yes. Say, for instance, someone is interested in getting into a pricey game like Armada, but they don't want to buy a core set and expansions if they won't end up liking it. Do you think a store should have maybe a super basic list, provides new players in tournaments, or would that get messy? Love to hear your thoughts.
So, ideally, yes. But you kind of reference maybe one of the biggest problems with this is the organization and cost and messiness factor. And then the reality of the time, effort, money spent to return for a store. Because, a lot of these stores aren't operating on like huge profit kind of a thing. So what I would say is that if you want to effectively build a community, this is something that we currently sort of a little bit do, which is we have a game library that has a bunch of board games that people can use for free, and also the starter sets for all of the expandable games that we do more extensive support from. But I think this is huge. I actually fundamentally think this is huge. If you want to build a community around a game, having readily accessible both starter materials, teaching materials, and actual decks that people can play, I think does nothing but increase the likelihood that people are... It lowers the barrier to entry and increases the likelihood people are going to play. The other thing on that is, this is why I love so much the Game of Thrones starter decks that they're putting out, which is they're doing, for each house, there's 8 houses, they're doing a $15 pack that is a ready-to-play deck for Game of Thrones the LCG. And that's great because the game is going on 3 years now, and to buy everything, you're going to have to spend $300 or $400. Once you spend $300 or $400, you got to open it all up, organize it. Then you got to figure out how to build your first deck. Then you got to lose for 6 months, and then you can hope to win a game at that point. Or with the new starter decks, right? You walk into the store and someone's there playing Thrones, or you and a friend walk in the store, and it's like, hey, for $15 each, you can choose your favorite house from Game of Thrones, Targaryen, and you can buy a deck and literally open the deck and be playing.
Nice.
Like just straight out the gate. So I think this is a problem that is easier solved on the game manufacturing development level.
Okay.
Where you can, we're kind of a unique case because we're so focused on so few games that having actual decks built or having starter materials available for those 8, 10, 12 games isn't that big of a deal. But if you're the typical retail store with 50, 100, 200 game lines, having that much organized and an inventory that's just for people to use, and then people taking stuff or losing stuff or cleaning, etc., is just a really big challenge. But having...
Or even if like 2 people show up at the same time and they both want to use the starter materials,
Yeah, sure. Same problem.
Yeah, sorry.
But if you create a product that makes the entry into a game $15, most people can afford that.
Yeah.
And if they can't, then they're probably not going to play that game anyway. So that's where it's like, to me, I would like to see starters for games that make the cost and time to entry as short as possible. So even with a game like Armada, as an example, if there was a starter, that was one of the problems I think that game had in the beginning, besides the fact that it's a long game and it takes a lot of space, is that the starter was $100, and buying 2 of those didn't even give you really a full fleet.
Yeah.
It gave you kind of 3/4 of a fleet for both sides. So like you had to be in for $300, $400 before you could even play a full game. And that's very difficult, especially for new games. You have a game like Warhammer, when you have a ton of players already, a high barrier of entry is less bad because there's usually players that'll let you play before you've bought anything. And so I think that's a real challenge, just to the accessibility of these games.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And going back even to that first, the card game question, I think innovating on starter decks and what that looks like is like that's more space for innovation instead of like, hey, here's a new mechanic. Also, I mentioned it before, but the whole concept of scaffold learning. There's an interview with the guy that did Super Meat Boy on YouTube. Check it out. Like, I think really big props to Escalation from the Escalation format on the core set of
X-Wing Second
Edition
Yeah, sure.
is fantastic, because I know one of the things I'm most intimidated about is going in knowing I don't know everything, right? And so it's like, oh, I just have to keep up with one ship, and then I kill, and it's like, okay, here's a little bit more advanced concept for you to consider.
We posted that, I played a game of Escalation against one of the developers, Alex Davey, and we posted the video where we played, and it's a core set format. The core set for X-Wing comes with 2 TIE Fighters and an X-Wing, if you're unfamiliar. And the second edition core set is the same ships, except for there's a format where you basically start with an X-Wing and 2 TIE Fighters on the board. And then when one gets destroyed, you put another one on the table, and he kind of gets a little stronger.
It gets a little stronger, maybe a little more complicated rules.
Exactly, because the basic ones don't have abilities, they don't have whatever. And so, like, it's really incredible because they make... those extra ships coming out makes it feel like a full game of X-Wing, but you don't get the complexity that comes with it.
Right.
And I think that is that's exactly the point, right?
Yeah, super. It's like it's not intimidating. It's not frustrating whenever it's like someone loses from something they don't understand.
And like you have a $40 product that 2 people can come in, and at $40 they can dip their toe in this game, right?
Fantastic, yeah.
So the Thrones example was $30 for 2 decks, kind of a thing. So it's just that I think that has to happen.
Yeah.
Like you buy the $40 starter, you open it, you're starting to play right now, and they have the quick build cards, and you play very quickly, and it's simple, and then it's fun, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now this was fun. I want to buy the Ghost, or I want to buy TIE Interceptors, or whatever, and you just kind of go from there.
Yeah, and it's just a great walk up the complexity scale.
Yeah, scaffolding learning.
Yeah,
That's
scaffolding
crazy.
learning. There needs to be more, like, step-by-step tutorial kind of things in tabletop games. I think.
That's good.
That's just me.
All right, last question for this show from Tony Sarah. I decided to invest in Legion to remember my Warhammer days. I'm currently very hyped about it, but I'm worried that the game will be quickly marked as a failure and forgotten. I don't see you talking about it very often. I understand that in terms of hobby is even more money and time investing than games like Armada, but I feel they have a great game design there and it is worth supporting. There's nothing screaming Star Wars louder than deflecting shots with a lightsaber and force choking your opponents while a snowspeeder flies over the battlefield.
That's pretty cool.
I guess my question is, what are your expectations and long-term predictions about this game, and is it worth investing in? Hello from Barcelona, Spain, and keep it up what you do. It is amazing. Tony.
Hello from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Thank you. Hello from Tulsa, and thank you for your question. And
By the way, I have
kind
been
words.
to Barcelona. It was lovely. It was nice.
I thought you said something about Ben.
Oh no, Ben's not been to Barcelona.
Like Ben's gone to Barcelona, and I was like, that seems out of place. So this is a great question.
Yeah, that's why I haven't said anything. I'm waiting for you to answer.
Yeah,
this
you're just
one.
like, hey, you talk. I'm just gonna. So I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I actually just got my Snowtroopers and Vader painted and finished, and they look great. Someone else painted it for me, Adam from the UK. I traded some. I had extra Destiny from the first couple of sets, and he is a professional painter in the UK. And he had stuff he wanted, so I traded him Destiny for painting my models.
Okay.
And they look great. So I'll be tweeting pictures of those at some point soon and linking him up. But the truth is, I agree. I think Legion is a great tabletop war game. I think it's super fun. I think the design's really great. I think Alex, the designer, did a really great job with that game. The problem with Legion, for me, and they solve some of the problems, which is it's way easier to put the models together than a lot of miniature games that I played.
Which is intimidating.
Again, that accessibility, how fast can you actually start playing? If you haven't ever played a game like this, you have to learn how to glue, you have to buy the glue, you have to learn how to prime, you have to learn how to shave off the mold lines, you have to learn how to paint, and that's before you even play, and then you're hundreds of dollars in before you start playing. But the truth is that I think for a long time the world has needed a Star Wars miniatures game. And it feels like the prompt on the design was make a Star Wars miniatures game.
Sure.
And that's what came out.
Yeah.
Nothing fancy. And we were talking earlier about the lack of you don't need to really innovate on.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, even just like, let's take Call of Duty, Star Wars Battlefront,
Halo.
Everything, right? It's the same game. Just put a new skin on it and maybe like some.
Well, and that's what with like Fortnite, right? It's kind of like that, but like with a little different things going on. Ben giving me a funny face over there. Anyways, the thing about it to me is I do think it's a good game, but I think it's a miniature war game, right? And the reason I think something like X-Wing was so successful is because they cut out all of those barriers to entry and made it super affordable to play. You can get a full list together for X-Wing for like under $150. There's no assembly, there's no painting, it's ready to play immediately kind of a thing. And it's super fun. The games are shorter than a typical war game and stuff.
And the core box comes with all of the terrain that you need.
Yeah, there's not even the terrain element. The space is a 3x3 instead of a big board. But I think as far as miniature war games go, it's exactly what people that wanted a Star Wars miniature war game wanted. So I think the game is successful, will continue being successful, but it's also not really pushing the bounds on accessibility.
Yeah.
Now I will say it is in a few ways. The easier to glue stuff and the game itself is streamlined and simplified, which I think when it comes to innovation of gameplay, that's an important step, which is design. Look at the first Warhammer games and how complex and the hundreds of pages of rule books and hardcover rules that come out every year versus Legion, which is like 5 or 10 pages. You don't need a rule book, right? You just play. And even the way the movement works and all that is super streamlined. So I think it is actually a great entry point to miniature war games. But there is a reason. Earlier this year, we did the State of Tabletop podcast. Yeah. And besides RPGs, the smallest category was miniature war games. And I think that is directly because of the barrier to entry to those games. And so I don't know what your community is like where you're at, but the other thing about miniature war games that is interesting as well is that to me, store and tournament attendance does not equate to whether or not the game is successful. And we saw this with Imperial Assault, which had a skirmish version and store championships and regionals, which were not the most heavily attended, but is a game that has apparently still like doing very well, primarily because of the campaign component and the modeling, the hobby aspect. So like people are buying Legion, and like I know some of the locals here who don't want to play until it's fully painted. And so like...
Well, and they probably don't want to play on an empty battlefield either.
Yeah, so it just takes a lot. So I don't think you should be worried about this being quickly marked as a failure of a game and not going to get made. I think this game has years of support to come. And I think it's good enough that it's worth buying. Even if a year or two, 6 years from now, it goes away, you will have those models forever. The models are great. And it's going to be a good time. Like it's a good game.
Yeah, it's a good game. It's serving a subset of a subset of a subset. Which is basically like, tabletop gamers, and then you move into like miniatures gamers, and then miniatures games which require like more than the space, a normal like dinner mat space, and require a great amount of already pre-produced both terrain and usually painting the miniatures. Yeah. Right. So that's like, you're going a couple steps, and with each of those, you get a little bit less and a little bit less. And then Star Wars on top of that, so you may not have people who already have all this stuff may be so heavily invested in another one of these games that it doesn't make sense for them to go over to Star Wars.
Yeah, and because Imperial Assault existed for so many years, for the people that are just in the hobby element of it, they may well have already got their Star Wars miniature fix with those models. So there's a lot going on there, but as far as I can tell, I know that... the first print run of the game, when the core set and the first wave came out, sold out, and they had to make more of it. They were talking about that at Gamma. They sold out well before the game even came out. So from those signs, all I know right now is that the game is doing well. I assume at Gen Con at the in-flight, we'll probably get an update about Legion and just how it's doing. And so we'll see. But I expect that game, and they've actually been doing, we talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago on the cast. My favorite thing they're doing with Legion is ultimately how they're handling the news cycle. Which is...
Tell me more, is that?
Yeah. So basically, they had the core set come out and some expansions, and then every month, they're basically putting out a commander and a support unit for a faction, and also announcing another something.
Okay.
So it was like, we got Leia and the troopers, or we're getting... Not yet, but we'll get Palpatine and the Royal Guards that they announced. And then that same month, like a couple weeks later, they've been announcing another thing. But instead of it being like Imperial Assault, where it was like, here's the deluxe box and 5 new characters all at once, and then 6 months with nothing, they're doing a very like consistently news and releases. Yeah. And so I definitely, I don't know, I think it's successful. I'm curious what makes you think that it's going to be marked as a failure.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Because the launch couple of weeks was just, it was super hot. And we haven't done as much with it, and I think tying the whole podcast together.
Ooh, all right.
I don't know if you had any more thoughts on it.
No, I don't. I want to see what you're doing here.
But I think, a lot of people asked us when it was coming out, because we did the demo at Gen Con, and then that was kind of the last we did with it.
Sure.
And we support it locally. Some people, a good number of people play it locally and have bought it from us and whatnot. But ultimately, we didn't feel like at the time it was pushing forward enough what we were focused on doing.
Yeah.
And so spending our effort and time supporting a game that we knew would be very difficult for people to get into, we just didn't think it was like the right choice for where we were at and what we were focused on. Even earlier we were talking about, we haven't done a Learning Arkham series yet. And I think that if we're going to spend time on making like a learning series, it makes a lot more sense for us to make a Learning Arkham series than a Learning Legion series.
Right.
Just because of how many people it's actually going to apply for. And it's kind of a little counterintuitive, because Legion seems like the harder game to get into. So the one that needs that kind of a thing more.
Sure, yeah.
But even then, it's like you can only make that process so much easier.
Yeah.
Like with Arkham, we can actually make it very easy to learn, very easy to buy. and very easy to get into, and then you get it and you can start playing immediately. With Legion, we can do all that. You buy it, it still shows up, and it's like, unless we put the models together for you, still a huge barrier to entry. So, miniature games in general are just a tough category for us to kind of wrap our mind around, and it's something we're getting better at and constantly trying to figure out. But we'll see. And personally speaking, I think Legion has several years of good times left in it, if not many more. I mean, I'm curious to see where they go. They're kind of giving us the obvious stuff so far.
Yeah.
Palpatine,
There's
Leia, Han, Boba Fett, right, etc. And so I'm hoping they get to Clone Wars and droids and Gungans, God forbid Gungans, and all down the line. So we'll see. I'm excited to watch it. I plan on at least having my Snowtrooper, Stormtrooper, Vader army rolling around, slicing people up, and we'll see what happens. So I have a question. We always end the show with a question. We love having everyone answer in the comments below. So if you would take the time to do that, I appreciate it. If you have a question after, you can feel free to ask that. If not, we're out of here. My question is, what do you think is the one factor that keeps the most people out of tabletop games?
Ooh, that's a great one.
Thanks for watching. Until next time, keep playing.